Okay, welcome everybody. I'll go ahead and say the prayer. Our dear, kind Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this beautiful opportunity that we have to expand our minds. We're so grateful for Pascal and for the mission that he served in a time of great skepticism in the world. We're grateful for this opportunity that we have to discuss his wager and to see what it can do for us. And we ask thee to please bless us to ferret out the truths and to understand principles contained in there. And we ask thee to please bless Jolene and Shelley and Shay, who are not with us, that they will find peace and also have the capacity to do the things that they are asked to do. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen. I'm just going to step over to my printer and get something I needed really quick.
You bet. So, ladies, Pascal's wager. I can't believe how beautiful the timing was, that it was only a couple of pages to read at the time of my very busy life in Texas. So, but what I want to do is I want to kind of follow his argument. So I'm going to ask, what was Pascal's argument? And we're going to go from there. And what we want to do is we're going to read some of the places in here where he is building his argument. So, but if you could come up with some of those, like what is he trying to, actually, we need to talk about his bio first. Sorry. So you heard in the prayer that he lived in a time of great skepticism. Do you know anything about that?
He lived in the mid 1600s, right?
Yeah. So
he was at the time of
Francis Bacon.
But yeah, that, and well, Francis Bacon was doing good. It seems like he was pretty solid. But what was it Descartes? I can't say it right.
Rene Descartes. So you just don't say the S or the T, I think.
Okay. Descartes. And didn't he have philosophies like what is truth and can you even prove it? And it's just kind of really wishy-washy. That's kind of my fuzzy understanding.
Yeah, your fuzzy understanding is right on, actually. But what's interesting is Francis Bacon had a part in this.
Oh.
Because he was, rather than continuing just to study the knowledge that we know, just for the sake of knowing, he was saying we really need to start asking a bunch of questions. And so I think he did wonderful things, but I also think that the adversary uses wonderful things to go the wrong way. So yeah, Descartes was what's called a skeptic. So he was doubting God. And then later on, we get people like Kant, who, how I like to remember Kant, he was a good man, I'm sure, but he can't write any, or he can't see that the moral code comes from God. So what he was trying to do was he was saying, how can you write a moral code without God? Let's figure this out. So that's kind of where things went bad, is during this time in the 1600s, right after the printing press, right after Francis Bacon. So there was a lot of skepticism in the world at this time.
I have a quick question. So like Audrey talks a lot about natural law kind of being something that's not taught it's disappeared from the landscape for the last like 100 years or something like that. But during these types of times, like clear back in the 1600s, when you have philosophers trying to write moral codes without God, did it disappear for them at certain points too? I mean, was it really just 100 years ago that it wasn't really part of the general education, or at least the education of the people who could get education? I don't know. I was just wondering, because it seems like there's always opposition, and it seems like Satan would want us to forget about natural law as often as he could. And so it seems like that would come up over and over throughout history.
Yes. So first of all, Kant came later, like 50 years later or 60 years later. He was beginning of 1700, I think, sometime around there. But he was one of the central thinkers of what was called the Enlightenment. And you've heard of that. Mm-hmm. And so the Enlightenment is where you get a lot of the philosophy that's really trying to find where natural law is coming from, that it's probably not coming from God, but it's just something that's there that doesn't have anything to do with. I'm probably going into a place where I haven't really studied enough, but I just study the Enlightenment. But you will see that people like Voltaire and Rousseau, he wrote in the 1700s, so did Voltaire. They were going, also Locke, which I love Locke, and the founders loved John Locke, but they were all thinking about this contract, the social contract that we should do. Also Hume thought of that. Hume, Rousseau, and Locke. But Kant lived around this time too. And they thought, let's basically get together as people. Let's make this social contract so that we are good with each other and that we promote the moral good. And we're basically going to weed out God. They don't say this, but you can see that they're trying to fuzz him out, like get rid of him. So this is all happening as soon as we begin to ask questions and to question the things that are already, that we've been listening to or learning for many centuries. But you also have to recognize that people like Isaac Newton and Galileo and who's the guy that said we don't revolve around the sun doesn't revolve around the earth? Copernicus. So they were always questioning things. So they were doing what Francis Bacon wanted people to do, was to question the old, not so much question it, but just let's look for some evidences of other things that go a new route, which I think is a very good thing, but it can also be used for bad. That's a long answer. But yeah, we are going into this Enlightenment time. So, but Pascal was the guy that was fighting against Descartes. So he's the one that he's writing this apologetic. It's what's called Pensées is what he wrote. And there are just a bunch of thoughts, and that's what that means in French. So he knows that this was his strongest mathematical argument that he could come up with about the existence of God. But he also recognized that it didn't have a ton to do with faith. He was just showing logically why we should vote, not why God exists or that he exists, but an argument of why we should choose that he exists, believe that he exists, if that makes sense.
And this is Pascal, right?
Pascal. Sometimes they say Pascal. Yeah.
So wait, I didn't know that you couldn't hear me, so I'm sorry. I'm just getting back on. So you said that he was fighting against someone. Who was that someone?
Descartes, Descartes. Oh, I think because it has ES on it, that's right. It's Descartes is how you would say his name. You just don't say
Oh,
ES on the end.
okay.
Yeah.
And what did Descartes do then?
Descartes is a man who was the skeptic that he is fighting against or bantering with, because Descartes is taking us to a place where we can begin thinking, well, wait, I don't think we need God. We just need to use reason. So this is called the age of reason as well. So we're going to use this to reason out, and we reason by looking at evidences, things we see, things we can touch, things we can hear. That's using our reason.
Oh, right. Okay.
They don't realize you can reason with faith too.
Yes.
So, okay. Do you have any questions about the kind of world he lived in?
A messed up one.
Kind of. Well, yeah, they're starting to ask a lot of questions, but in a way, it's a really good thing. And God uses this time to start giving people the opportunity to question, do I really need to stay with this Catholic Church? Can we protest against it? I think we could. And it just brings out a lot of change that needs to happen, but it also brings out a lot of doubts. So, okay.
So
All
he's
right.
going to bring information, is what you're saying.
What did you say?
This time period brings on the Reformation.
It does. This brings on the Reformation, and we can be super grateful for it, but we can also recognize that there's some danger.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at the wager, and let's look at what is his argument. What are some of the first things that you see?
Can you first tell me, like, is his wager against Descartes right here? Is this against Descartes specifically?
Not him specifically, but against
His ideas.
against agnosticism.
Okay.
So let's look up agnosticism. Hold on here. I'm going to write down, what is agnosticism? Somebody want to look that up?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So Wikipedia says agnosticism is the view that the existence of God, the divine, or the supernatural is not known or knowable with any certainty. It is the question that, does God exist? Yes, would probably imply theism. No would imply atheism. And I'm not sure would imply agnosticism.
Mhm.
So it's, I don't know.
Right. And to make that more clear, and you read it, is that the existence of God is not knowable. We can't know about it. So let's not go there anymore. And you're going to see that attitude. In fact, let's just look at that so you can underline it and know about it.
So
Okay.
I studied the Gnostics, right, quite a bit when in Jesus's time period, when, well, they were kind of hidden in Jesus' time period, but right after Jesus. The Gnostics were those who would think that I have gnosis, right? Gnosis is the supreme knowledge of things, the knowing. And so it's interesting how really closely related, but not quite. This is, yeah, they're
The
exactly.
prefix ag is like, I don't know, like an anti kind of prefix or something.
A, actually. So I don't know if you're on the adult humanities class notes, but I just wrote down Gnostic right there. It's spelled with a G, and it just means that you have this esoteric knowledge. Do we have Gnosticism going on in the world right now, do you think?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer, right? I love C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, how he talks about like, he's like, let's not talk about this soft soap stuff. Like they live in the best of both worlds where they can enjoy they're out in nature and say, oh, maybe God exists. And then they're doing something that maybe is against the commandments, and then they can just quickly, forget it. So there's just no commitment or anything like that. So they have the comfort on one side, and then they have, they can enjoy what they want on the other side.
Good. I just added that to agnosticism. No commitment, but much comfort. Good. So I also want to ask, do you think there is any Gnosticism in the world? People looking for esoteric knowledge that no one else knows. Let's get together in our groups and we see that everywhere.
What's Gnosticism again then? What?
Esoteric.
So you're saying it's like things that are not widely published, or they're secret, or?
Yes. So many years ago, my brother got involved in a group that would study the last days, but they would really go far into interpretations of the scriptures that were really kind of fun to think about. I listened for a while, and then I realized this is not revealed, and it's not something we need to go and start to believe, because it's not revealed, and you're going along with a group of people. Anyway, my brother fell away from the church, and everyone else in this group did, because when you get so involved in learning things that are not really revealed in the church, or you're doing it for the sake of knowing so much more than somebody else, that attitude, that's what Gnosticism is. So you're right, Tracy, when you add the A at the beginning, it's agnosticism, and it just means, it's not knowable, no commitment. I'm comfortable. I don't have to, if I know about God, then I leave my comfort zone. So we're going to get to this, but look, did you print off this copy, both of you, or do you have one from the internet? Oh, good. Okay, so the second column on the first page, if you go down almost to the end, the penultimate paragraph, right at the very bottom of that, the last line of that second to the last paragraph, it says, the right thing is not to wager at all. Okay, that is agnosticism right there. That's the skeptics. That's what they're saying. So I want to write something down here for a minute. So if we can pinpoint that, then we can recognize that there's there's three ways to believe. And you read it, Tresta, in your definition. What are the three ways?
To believe in God, to not believe in God, or to not care.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got theism, atheism. There's that A again, not believe in God. And then there's agnosticism. And I think it's super important that we know the difference between atheism and agnosticism, so that we can be able to understand the other person. Good questions. Okay.
So I don't know. I couldn't find what you were talking about on the paper. You said second line, and
it's about right here.
Higher than that. Oh, okay. I was looking at the very bottom. Okay.
Yeah, I said penultimate paragraph, which is.
What does that mean?
Penultimate is direct translation from Spanish. Sorry. So it's the second to the last paragraph. So it's not the ultimate, but the penultimate.
In Britain, it would be the last paragraph but one.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, so you found it now? Okay. All right, let's go now. What is Pascal's argument? What?
Okay, this is the part I want help on because I have been in so many discussions with youth and moms where I need to go through an exercise like this with them. And I don't know, I always struggle to figure out how to pull it out of them. So anyway.
Okay, but you're the master. You taught me that writing principles is like using clay, building this. This is how I think it is too. Because if we find some things and then somebody else finds something before, then we move that down and we put it's like this whole process. We don't have to have the right answer at the very beginning. We just have to get the stuff on the paper and start to mold it and shape it and then really
So we're just kind of pulling out premises then.
Yeah.
And do you start with a conclusion before you start pulling out the premises, or you pull out the premises and then if you find a conclusion in the reading, then you put that in and then you just kind of keep moving things around?
Yeah, I don't ask for a conclusion at first. I just like to start off with some of the beginning ideas, the premises. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. See, I teach better when you're asking good questions.
That seems to be my job, is trying because it doesn't come naturally to me. So I have to get in there and ask.
Well, so many things don't come naturally to me either, but when I ask a question, someone else doesn't understand, they ask a question, then I change my question to be a better one. And then that's just how I see teaching is. Just like I told you the other day, I fly by the seat of my pants because it just feels comfortable that way. Oh, I'm getting hot, everyone. I went out walking outside. It's bitter. All right. So what premises do you see?
One I saw was either God exists or he doesn't.
Okay.
And is this better, like, is it better to like try and find his quotes, or do you guys like to do that more, or just kind of restate it in your own, like distill it down into your own words? Or does that matter?
Either way it works. In this case, when you said either God exists or he doesn't, it's clear in that to me. But if some student, like yesterday, they pulled out something that I didn't understand, that didn't make sense, and I said, okay, where'd you find that? And then he said, it's at the top of the second page, left column, and we read it. If you win, you win everything. If you lose nothing. And it made it so much more clear. So I'm just, let's ask you to pull anything out. And then if it's not clear, I'll pull that out of you. So that's kind of how I like it. If I try to orchestrate so much in a class, it's like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do it. Some people do though. So yes, is there anything in that first or second paragraph? Yay, Shelley is here. Welcome back, Shelley.
Hello.
Your life is crazy busy. I told everybody that your son might be home today or tomorrow. When do you find out? You're muted.
We still don't. It probably won't be today since we haven't heard yet, but it'll be probably tomorrow then for sure.
Wow.
So,
Oh, that's awesome. Just to bring you up to date really quickly, we were just talking about how Pascal lived in a time of great skeptical thought about God. And so he is using his gifts of mathematical reasoning to show why you should believe that God exists. He doesn't show how he exists or anything because he can't. But he does say, this is my argument of why you should choose that God exists and then live accordingly. So then now we're just trying to pull out any premises that we can in the first, let's look at the first column and see what kind of thoughts that we get from him.
For me, it was like almost down to the very bottom. There's a paragraph that says, is there no substantial truth that there are so many true things which are not truth themselves? So that took me like 5 times to read it, to understand what it was even saying, first of all. But then the other thing I thought of, we just need to define these words of what there is a huge difference between what is true and what is truth.
Yes. Let's go up a little higher and just see what he's saying. So he's talking about, this is a mathematician talking in that larger paragraph that starts, we know that the infinite exists. Do you see that one?
Yes.
So we know it exists without knowing its nature, just as we know that it is untrue that numbers are finite. Is that true? Or numbers are, yes, they are not finite. Thus, it is true that there is an infinite number, but we do not know what it is. What would happen if we did know what the infinite number was?
It couldn't be infinite.
Right. Right. So then he says, it is untrue that it is even, untrue that it is odd. For by adding a unit, it does not change its nature. Yet it is a number, and every number is even or odd. It is true that this applies to every finite number. So yeah, we know with every finite number if it's even or odd, but we can't know if the infinite is even or odd. But it's still true. It is truth. Okay, you guys help me with this. When you're looking at the word true or truth, how would you use it using this example of the infinite and the finite numbers? What is true and what is truth?
So truth is there are even and odd numbers.
Yeah.
What is true is we don't know the infinite number is even or odd.
Right. Right. It's also the truth that there is infinite numbers.
Yes.
But so then let's read that sentence. Where was it that you read?
The one 2 below that. So is there no substantial truth?
Seeing that there are so many true things which are not truth itself. So the true things are that there are even and odd numbers. Wait, it is entered in even. Oh, I'm reading the part. Yes, it is number, and every number is even or odd. So that's a true thing, but it's not truth. Well, it is. I don't know.
I was kind of thinking maybe truth with a big T is kind of like that eternal, infinite that is hard for us to comprehend.
Yeah.
But we are kind of stuck in the here and now. We can just see like the physical or what our finite minds can understand. So we can only understand as high as we can count, kind of, and they are odd and even, but we can't, it's just harder to. And so when we talk about like who we are, like eternal beings and all of that, it's just hard for us to comprehend that, just like it is to comprehend the infinite numbers. And we can't name that infinite number, but we can see who we are like right now. And that's like truth with a little t. But to always remember that we do have that divine heritage, even if we can't really comprehend it.
Yeah. I like that. That's kind of how I understand it too, but you explained it really well.
I don't know like the answer to like the truth part or whatever it is, but what I like about that part when I read it, because at first you're like, how can you know something is true if you don't know its nature? That's really confusing. You're like, no, I would have to know its nature to know it. But that example was so good because it's like, okay, I do know some numbers. I know that they keep going, but I know their nature here and now. I don't know everything. And then I do know that every number is even or odd. So to me, it kind of just was like, well, I don't know exactly like the nature of God. I can't comprehend it, but I do know something about it. I know it's going to be, there's something familiar to me about this, and that I can base my faith on now because I have this little truth here, and I know it's bigger and better, and then I can't understand all of that, but I do know what even and odd numbers are now, and it's either going to be even or odd. I just don't know. So,
Yes. But I can base my faith on what I imagine his nature to be. I'm just kind of, I didn't get it right, but I hope I'm getting all these down right, kind of. So I wrote down number 4, I do not know the nature of God, but I know something about it. And I can base my faith on what I imagine his nature to be because I know a little bit of it. Whoops.
yeah, and I'm okay with knowing that numbers are infinite, and I'm not going to be able to know that. And so I thought that was such a great example, because you're like, oh yeah, we accept all of that and everything that comes with mathematics without being able to like have this completely comprehensive knowledge, and we accept like, yep, it's infinite. I can't wrap my mind around the fact that numbers are infinite, and so it's okay to be like, I can't wrap my mind around it, but there's still so many principles and things that go along with knowing that there are numbers even if they are infinite. So I don't know.
Yeah. So are we talking about patterns help us with our faith? I know he didn't say that, but he's kind of like implying that patterns help us.
Can I give you a pattern?
What's that?
May I give you a pattern?
Yes.
Okay. So Julie, you know this. I know numerology really well. So even numbers are female and odd numbers are male. And even numbers are finishers or beginners, sorry. Even numbers begin something, like women begin the birth of a child, right? They begin something. Male numbers finish something. So like we always say, the number 7 is a completion, right? It completes something. But so does 9, and so does 5, and so does 11. They complete something. So,
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean a 9 and 11 complete something?
So if you knew the characteristics of each number, so that each number has their own characteristic, and that would take a long time for me to explain all of that. But every number has a spiritual characteristic, okay? And evens are female that begin a task, and odds are males that complete that task.
Okay.
So when he says that there's an infinite amount of numbers, that's true, right? That's obviously true. But then when he says now all numbers are even or odd, but we don't know the infinite number is either even or odd, it makes me think of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, right? We don't know if the God who created this world was Heavenly Father, or Heavenly Mother, or both. Anyway, it's I know it's way out there, but it's fun to know and understand numbers at a different level, and to be able to see. I love Pascal. I love Pascal's triangle. I love everything he does with numbers. So I think it's really fun, a different part of him, a different viewpoint that I have studied.
That is cool. So I know the Hebrew language uses numbers and numberology. Is that what you said? Numerology. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Oh,
not the same theology of the world, right? It's a
yeah,
way different.
very. Okay, so then can somebody finish reading where we left off with Tresta's little paragraph that she read? So we would read, looks like there's 4 little tiny paragraphs of the rest of the page, because I'd love to read that part. Does anybody want to do that for us?
I can read it.
Go for it.
Thus we know the,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Thus we know the existence and nature of the finite, because we too are finite and extended in space. We know the existence of the infinite without knowing its nature, because it too has extension, but unlike us, no limits. But we do not know either the existence or the nature of God, because he has neither extension nor limits. But by faith we know his existence. Through glory we shall know his nature.
Thank you. What?
I think so beautiful.
What?
I think that is so beautiful. I put a heart by it. I think that is so, so beautiful.
Which part do you think is beautiful? The whole thing, or is there something that's just sticking out and making sense for you?
We know his existence. By faith, we know he's there, right? Just like we do with the infinite numbers. But through glory, and that's that glorification, like the temple glory, right? Because that's the third step in the temple. Through glory, we shall know his nature. And we do get to know his nature because we become like him. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
So as we take on the divine nature, then we can comprehend the divine, we can know him.
Yes. Somebody write that down on the sheet. I'm writing on my paper. As we take on the divine nature, we can know him better. Is that what you said?
We can know the divine.
Yeah, the divine. Oh, thank you. This is so beautiful. All right, so going to the next column, he gets to start talking about faith. I really think we need to read the next 3 little tiny paragraphs. So it goes from the top to relation to him. Who would like to read that?
I will.
Great.
Now I have already proved that it is quite possible to know that something exists without knowing its nature. Let us now speak according to our natural lights. If there is a God, he is infinitely beyond our comprehension, since, being indivisible and without limits, he bears no relation to us. We are therefore incapable of knowing either what he is or where he is. That being so, who would dare to attempt an answer to the question? Certainly we are not. Bear no relation to him.
Okay, do you think he's right? Or do you think he's wrong with that?
Saying, how presumptuous of you to say that you can become gods.
Right. Right. So, of course, we have to remember the restoration of the gospel was not in place yet. But it's good to recognize that's what he's saying. And part of our knowledge that we know we can become guards is knowing his nature, which is what Tracy had said. As we take on the divine nature, we know the divine, and we begin to understand. Go ahead.
Pascal, or however you say it, Pascal. Anyway,
Doesn't matter.
I guess he just doesn't realize, God could come and tell you, because that's what revelation is, something that we can't know on our own. by our own logical reasoning or thinking. Yes, it's so true. We can't reason these things. We can't figure out what God or who he is or where he is unless he comes and tells us.
Mhm.
And that's what he did to start the restoration.
What does Pascal know? What does he know about Revelation according to the last 1600 years?
But it's
Yeah, Shelley's going, nothing. Who was the authority of how people should live? Go ahead.
the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yeah. So according to his knowledge and according to history, there's no revelation. Right? Yeah. Okay. So look at that next paragraph on your own and see is there something that sticks out that we could add to his this argument? So we're pulling out premises. So just read that to yourself. Okay, ladies. What did you learn? Are there any premises we can add?
I guess, do we have reason cannot decide this question?
Yeah. So why is it that reason cannot decide the question?
Well, just because we can't comprehend God like he just proved to us, just like we can't comprehend the last infinite number, because that doesn't work.
Right. And so, but I have a question about that. When we're showing forth faith in God, are we using reason at all? Can we ask what is reason?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think we need to look that up. I'm going to look it up in the 1828. Okay. Does anybody have it or should I share my screen?
Yeah, you can share your screen.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. Okay. So it's Latin ratio, which is interesting. It proves to be, I'm not going to read that. Okay. That which is thought or which is alleged in words as the ground or cause of opinion, conclusion or determination. I have reasons which I may choose not to disclose. You ask me my reasons. I freely give my reasons. The judge assigns good reasons for his opinion, reasons which justify his decision. Hence, in general, it's the cause, ground, principle, or motive of anything said or done. that which supports or justifies a determination, plan, or measure. So according to these first two, can you reason when you have faith?
I don't think it's saying you can.
For some reason, you're muffled, and I don't know why.
Oh,
So I
I
didn't hear
think
you.
fan is on. Sorry.
You're what?
My fan and my computer.
Oh, okay. That's happened to me before too. Okay. So I can hear you though now. What did you say?
I was thinking it doesn't.
Okay. And why?
I'm going to switch out my mics real quick.
Oh, sure.
What's the question again, Julie?
So I asked the question, can you reason with faith? Can reason? Do you use reason when you are displaying faith? I guess that's what I was trying to say.
I guess could it be like, I don't know, evidence seems to fall on the side of reason to me. Like if you see the evidence, it's something your mind can grasp onto and reason from.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like you could have evidence in your life for your faith and reason upon that to strengthen your faith. Or, first you plant that little seed, the mustard seed, and then after the trial of that little bit of faith, you receive like a witness. And then upon that evidence, your reason can continue to grow. And so I don't know if do you need reason to start that mustard seed? And maybe Pascal's trying to give people a little reasoning to take the leap of faith.
Maybe.
Anyway, those are just some initial thoughts.
Yeah. And Tresta is almost done. Shelley, do you have anything to add while we're waiting for Tresta to change? Okay. So he's saying reason can't decide this question, probably because he is using the definition of reason that the men of his day are using.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think he's living in the apostasy too, right?
Yeah.
So what's the definition of reason in their day?
Basically what you're talking about, evidences, but because more knowledge, light knowledge has come down to us, we can recognize that we have evidences of our faith. For instance, the miracles that you and I saw in the celebration of how things came together when we thought nothing was going to work well at sometimes. We saw that through faith and through prayer and faith and work, we had miracles happen. And so we can recognize those miracles as evidences, and we know we're going to continue building our faith in God. Not that we really reasoned that out. It was pretty much implied, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So evidences of faith, I don't think were talked about. I don't think it was talked about then. But reason back then was anything you see, hear, touch, taste, we can reason about, we can think about, we can determine, we can see the evidences, and we can infer something, and then we can see that it works or it doesn't work, and then that's reasoning to them. But they couldn't see evidences of faith. Is there something I need to add to that I didn't get clear? Basically, that right then, reason can't decide this question according to what they understand is reason. Okay. So then he's saying, how will you wager? Reason cannot make you choose either. Reason cannot prove either wrong. And that's true. You can't reason that God exists or that he doesn't exist, right?
True.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then what happens? What is the next thing that he says in this next paragraph? We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of class. This is the agnostic speaking. What does the agnostic say?
He just thinks that the right thing is not to wager at all. But then Pascal says, yes, but you must wager. There's no choice. You are already committed. And I thought that's really interesting. I stopped and thought about that for a moment. Just we talk about a lot about the first principle of agency. He's saying you don't have a choice, but I guess they do have a choice because they can choose which one, but they have to choose.
Yeah,
Anyway, so I was trying to think about that.
Yeah, so if you replace wager with choose, all of us must choose. That is a first
okay.
principle. Yeah.
That's
So-
a good point because we always talk about how we have our agency, but I don't know if I've really focused on all men must choose.
Yeah.
And that's true. We have to choose. And there are scriptures about that saying, you lukewarm, you can't, whoever isn't with me is against me, something like that, or no man can serve two masters, you must choose the one or the other.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's not really like it's forcing us, it's just the nature of having our agency is therefore then we must choose.
Exactly. You have to choose. You can't just be an agnostic and just go, it's not knowable.
Well, if
We-
you do that, that's a choice. Like,
It
that's a choice you make.
Yes.
Choose, that's a choice in and of itself that puts you in a different category.
Yeah. Okay, so what has he been doing out of these 7 that we have here? What is he trying to, what's the full thing he's trying to say in a nutshell?
Make a choice, whether it be God or not God. Make a choice. Don't be lukewarm anymore.
And I'm not sure, I think this is a quote. I think he says this somewhere, but I've written down, since you are obligated to play, you must be renouncing reason if you hoard your life rather than risk it for an infinite gain, just as likely to occur as a loss amounting to nothing. So he's saying, therefore, you might as well, and this is down the road on his reasoning, you might as well choose God because, I mean, that's the point he wants to convince us of is choose God.
Yeah. Yes, excellent. Okay, so let's go about this game because he's comparing it to what? What is this game that he's comparing it to? Or what is the game? It's tossing the 2 coins, right? So
Oh,
you flip a coin,
yeah.
heads or tails. You either choose that exists or he doesn't exist. And then what is the argument? He says in this last paragraph on that first page, who wants to read that? And it goes over to the next page. So it's kind of long. Who would like to read that? Anybody?
I can read it. Where does it start?
So it's the last paragraph.
Yes.
But you must wager.
Okay.
And it ends on the next page.
Yes, but you must wager. There is no choice. You are already committed. Which will you choose then? Let us see. Since a choice must be made, let us see which offers you the least interest. You have two things to lose, the truth and the good, and two things to stake, your reason and your will, your knowledge and your happiness. And your nature has two things to avoid, error and wretchedness. Since you must necessarily choose, your reason is no more affronted by choosing one rather than the other. That is one point cleared up, but your happiness, let us weigh up the gain and the loss involved in calling heads that God exists. Let us assess the two cases. If you win everything. If you lose nothing. Do not hesitate then, wager that he does exist. That is wonderful. Yes, I must wager, but perhaps I am wagering too much. Let us see, since there is an equal chance of gain and loss. If you should win only 2 lives for 1, you could still wager. But supposing you stood to win 3.
Okay, I probably should have stopped you. I'm just realizing when you go back to that first part of that paragraph, you have 2 things to lose. You have the true and the good, and then he says 2 things on the line. He says 2 things to stake, but to me it looks like 4. But
I know I was a little confused by that. Was he coupling to get them together, and that's the
yeah.
2?
Yeah, because I think when you do reason, it does cause you to make a choice or a conclusion. So I guess reasoning causes the will, or causes you to choose something at your will. So I think that goes together. And then he says, your knowledge and your happiness. And he couples that together for some reason. But the thing that you avoid by choosing that he doesn't exist. So this is choosing if he doesn't exist, right? If he doesn't exist, you lose true and good. You put reason and will and knowledge and happiness on the line. Am I wrong? I'm not a mathematical thinker, and you can tell. But you also avoid error and wretchedness if he doesn't exist. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I get out of it. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask the scientist, Tracy.
What's your exact question?
Well, okay.
And
So-
Trust is the scientist.
Yeah, that's true. Both of you. Shelley, are you a mathematician? No. Look at the 4 of us in here. We're trying to just like deal with this mathematician who was incredible. But it seems to me that if you choose that he does not exist, then you lose the true and the good. You put reason and will and knowledge and happiness on the line, and you avoid error and wretchedness. Is that right?
If you choose that he does exist,
Does not.
because it seems like you wouldn't avoid error and wretchedness doing that.
Well, if he doesn't exist, and he doesn't exist, so it's the
Oh, then you don't run the risk of breaking commandments, and you won't have any regret.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're also going to lose the true and the good.
So basically, the only thing you're gaining is you are pushing off your conscience. You can sidestep your conscience, which many people have tried to do through the years. And I was talking about this with my kids, and one of them said, well, people today would just say, well, then you don't have your conscience around your neck anymore bothering you. And so I guess that's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
That's the one advantage. But then later he says, at the very last, he's talking about how you really will actually live a more deeply satisfying life.
At the very
He says
end.
it is true, you will not enjoy noxious pleasures, glory and good living, but will you not have others? And he said, you'll be faithful, honest, humble, grateful, full of good works, a sincere, true friend. And so the world would say ignoring our conscience is great. Like it helps us avoid error and wretchedness. But then on the other hand, the opportunity cost is that you won't have that deeper spiritual life. So you really are losing out there anyway.
Yes. So if you do, so you read this, let us assess the two cases. If you win everything. That means if you choose that God exists, and he does, you win everything. If you lose, meaning, what does that mean? If you win, you win everything. If you lose nothing. Can anybody explain what that next one part means? Does that mean if he's choosing?
You're making a bet. So like you're making a wager. So if you win the bet and say God doesn't exist, and then you win the bet, you just lose nothing because there's not much. I made like a little, it's too tiny probably on here, a little Punnett square. It's probably backwards. But like,
Oh, yes.
backwards, but like God exists or he doesn't. And then on the side, you've got like good and evil. Like you can choose whatever life. And so if God exists and you made the bet that he does and you live well, you live good as if he exists, then you have eternal salvation in heaven to look forward to. If he doesn't exist, but you bet that he did, you lost the bet, but you're not out much because you lived this good life, but it didn't really matter because he didn't exist, but you had other rewards. So you're really just not out that much. So that would be the win or the loss. And then if God exists, but you chose to live against him, then your reward or what you would win in the wager would be hell or eternal damnation, which is a pretty big loss. And then if he doesn't exist and you acted that way, then you're not out much. So in your square, you would want to bet heaven every time because it's the most to win. And if you lose, you just really don't lose much on all the others.
Oh, my husband was trying to explain that four square thing just this morning as I was talking to him.
Yeah,
But
I have it on mine too.
Oh, that's awesome. So I should have.
I found mine online on the wiki page or something. So it's not like I came up with it.
Okay, I need to put that in.
It's because you're not a gambler, Julie. Like if you gamble, you have to you have to write it out like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You're not gamblers either. This is the very first year I've ever taught this. No, it's not. We did teach it one more time. I did teach it once again, but I had totally forgotten about it. But I love that. If somebody could copy and paste it on the class notes, that would be good. I don't know how you do it, but I love it. So that's what he meant. If you win everything. If you lose nothing, except that you may have lost having to live, but you may have lost being able to live all the pleasures and whatever you want to during this life.
But really, that's not true happiness in the end. So that's not really a plus anyway.
No, that's
he
true.
says later.
Okay.
It's interesting. Oh, just a side note. Mark, my husband, told me a couple weeks ago about a PragerU where it was someone talking about all the benefits of believing in God. So why not just believe in God? And I thought, and he was saying, oh, it's such a fun idea. And then I read this and I thought, oh, well, ideas already out there. And then when I looked on the wiki page, it had a whole list of philosophers before Pascal that had the same idea, that they'd written about the same idea. So I think it's just really interesting to see how we think it's really clever or whatever when we hear it in these different places, but they probably got it from someone else.
Because
we just kind of built it out. Yeah.
Well, I remember thinking this when I was a little kid, like without having read anything. Like I remember thinking, what if my parents are just, brainwashing me, or like I know they really believe it, but what if it's not really true? And I remember thinking the same, I mean, not as eloquently or whatever, but thinking, well, I don't really know if it is or isn't true, but if it isn't, then oh well, at least I covered everything, and like did it, and then as your faith grows or whatever. But I remember thinking that even as a little kid. And so I think it's probably in one of your classes, Julie, when my kids were talking about Pascal's wager, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought about the same bet when I was little. Like I think it's I don't know, like when you say like, who thought of it, or the idea of it, it's something that maybe we all just have to face when you're at that moment of like developing faith and deciding like, well, wait, what am I going to lose? What am I going to lose out on if I go all in on this, something that I can't really know? Or like in my case, being very young and just believing parents, or choosing to live a lifestyle that you can see that your family's choosing, but other families or other kids don't. And you're like, well, how do I know? Oh well, I'll make I'll make the bet, right? I'll just see where this leads, and then it leads, to good places where you start to have your reasoning in your faith, and it in your heart and your mind. But kind of to start that, even as a young kid, you kind of have to make that wager to go all in.
You do. Did anybody else have that happen, that same experience at one point in your life?
Mhm.
I think
maybe not when I was a child, but just, I don't know, as an adult, thinking and seeing friends kind of leaving the church and all of that, but just thinking, there's nowhere else to go.
yeah.
I'm going to stay right where I am, because where would I go? And I don't want to live without the gospel in my life. So I'm going to stay in the boat.
Yeah.
And it does take that choice. And I feel like when we make that choice, our faith is increased, and we're really rewarded with rich gifts of the Spirit, making that choice. And like you were saying, Shelley, and then our testimony becomes stronger, and it's no longer this gamble or wager. I mean, we just know. And like he says at the end here, I loved how he said, you will realize that, he says, I'll tell you that you will gain even in this life, and that at every step you take along this road, you will see that your gain is so certain and your risk so negligible that in the end you will realize that you have wagered on something certain and infinite for which you have paid nothing. And I feel like that's the journey of testimony.
Oh, I love that. And did you see, is it the next one? Yes. If my words please you and seem cogent, you must know that they come from a man who went down upon his knees before and after to pray this infinite and indivisible being, to whom he submits his own, that he might bring your being also to submit to him for your own good and for his glory, and that strength might thus be reconciled with lowliness. Do you think this man was faithful?
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, he's recognizing this is the strongest argument you can have rationally. But I'm pretty confident that he recognized that this is a real short ladder to get us to the understanding of who God really is. But it's the one that will hopefully invite the skeptic in to just think about it, at least, or the agnostic. Yeah.
Maybe, I think it tugs, like I was saying before, tugs on the reasoning of those people that are very logical. Like I know people who just need to reason it out. And so this really is appealing to those people.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that Christianity, or the gospel of Christ, the doctrine of Christ, I like how in the manual, the church handbook of instructions, Dave pointed out to me this week that they just changed. They don't talk about the 9 basic doctrines, because he said in the handbook that when you have an S, a plural doctrine, that usually means the doctrines of man or Satan. And so now they're not looking at the 9 basic doctrines. They're saying it's the doctrine of Christ. And then all those other tenets are points of this doctrine. So before we used to have the plan of salvation and atonement of Jesus Christ, the Godhead, obedience, all of those things, but those are points in this doctrine of Christ. So let's call this Christianity. And it's basically a marriage proposal to man's soul. And we have to decide if we're going to say yes or no. Because we know that that really is the only choice we have, yes or no. What do you think about that? I know that question wasn't like a really winner of a question, but when I was thinking about this, that Christianity is a marriage proposal from the bridegroom to the human soul, body and soul, then we have two choices. We can say, yes, I want to marry the bridegroom, or no. And do you know what I mean by marry? It's that 10 virgin story.
I really like that analogy because even when you get married, it's kind of a gamble.
It is.
You're like, you're not exactly sure. You have to put faith in that, and then back it up with like being all in and until you get those results. So I like that Christianity's a marriage proposal from the bridegroom, because you just have to decide to be all in, and then you get those fruits. So that's a good.
So what I love about our temple covenants is that we get to say yes over and over again as we go and do them for the dead. And we're given so many opportunities to accept him and say yes and make that choice.
Yeah. Did you ever think that it's a wager every day?
No, but that's true.
Yeah, it is interesting. So the wager does exist every single day for us. So what's your biggest takeaway from the wager, do you think?
Well, I don't know if I missed the discussion at the beginning, the very first part when it talks about our justice before the divine justice. Because Julie, I've been like really caught up on that word thought about justice, and it's expanding this week. I'm just like, oh, that's what being just is. That's what being just is. So I really liked, I don't know, adding to some of my thoughts for that are really helping me change my way of being by thinking about the word just. And so I spent some time thinking about like our justice and God's justice and how that's different. And then what that means when I try to be just with others. It's really a reach for God's justice. Like I'm not putting justice in other people. I'm saying what would be my just action. And so I really like that from the wager, that it just, added up to more of the, interdisciplinary type thing of just like, oh, this is just an interesting way to look at that. And that, okay, I'm not even sure what he means about there is not so great a disproportion between our justice and God's as between unity and infinity. I'm sure I don't understand everything to do with that, but I like those thoughts today, that God's justice must be as vast as his mercy, and just how big it is and what that can mean to me when choosing to be just with others. So
Yeah.
that was a really good takeaway. And then I couldn't help but thinking this week about, like, as I'm reading it, there's just lots of people I know that are really, they're good people. Like you'd be like, they're good. Like I know that they have good intentions, but they don't take the wager. Like they're like, I don't really think he exists. And so they live their life in a certain way. And it was just really interesting. I'm not sure that I came to like any certain conclusion about it, other than sometimes, in our world today, like people get frustrated with like religion and like these ideas that like I have exactness and personal righteousness. And it's hard to find that line because you don't want to be caught up too much in the applications and all of those things. You want to live it well and like truly deeply. But some of the people I know that like claim like, well, we're good people, we're like, we don't need religion, we're just going to keep doing this, and how easy it is to get off because they don't follow all those principles, and they're not lining up with Christ every day, and because they don't believe in it, they like, I would still say they're good people, like they're still trying to be good humans, but it just gives me so much more to my life to have covenants and actual principles that I adhere to strictly, that help me say, yes, I'm making this wager today, I'm choosing that you do exist, and I'm also acting in ways that show that, rather than to be like, oh, he probably exists, I'm just going to be a good person, I'm not going to like kill anybody or steal anything or do that kind of stuff. But there's so many little things in our lives that help us line up to choose him, that aren't like those big commandments, and that just as you go, it just takes you either away or toward him. And sometimes people choose him so application wise, like thinking they have to do that it leads them to like judge others and to do all these things that actually lead them the other way, that make it so like in their choosing and saying like, I'm holding on, I don't know, they go overboard in that control over others and what other people have to do, I guess. I think, anyway, I just enjoyed thinking about that this week, about making a wager and what that means. I saw one little thing on YouTube, because the reading was so short, I got to look up a few things about Pascal's wager, and it was really interesting. I learned a lot about pragmatism, which I hadn't ever really thought about as a philosophy, and different things. So it was good. But a lot of the people that were like discussing Pascal's wager, I could tell are on the side of like, oh, but religion is harmful, and like it's done a lot to hurt humanity. And so there are things in his wager that actually leave the world in a worse place by following Christianity. But it was easy to see, even in their arguments, like, yes, but that's not the invitation from the bridegroom.
Yeah.
But anyway.
At the very beginning of class, we did talk about agnosticism, which is that skeptic attitude that you're going to see everywhere. So if you have time to watch the recording, you can go back to listen to that part. But beautiful takeaway. And I don't know if Trust is around, but if you are, do you have a takeaway?
I am here. I just had to close off my window. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, beautifully.
Oh, yeah. No, my takeaway was just that I fell more in love with Pascal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought, I liked him before, but now I'm like, wow, I didn't know how much he loved God. It was his biography I was reading when I was pregnant with Etienne.
Oh.
And his father's name is Etienne, and that's why I named my son Etienne.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love Pascal, however we want to say it too. And I think my biggest takeaway is it was huge what Tracy said for me. As we take on the divine nature, we can know him better. And that to me was an invitation that God gave me during conference, is that if I am going to strengthen my foundation, I need to know God more and know Christ more. And that's my goal. And so as she said that, I went, oh, if I can be more in line with God's nature in everything I do, and I have a long way to go because sometimes I get really silly and dumb. But as I do that, I can know him better. So good discussion. Okay, we have another reading. Let me just see what it is. Oh, yes, it's kind of a short read. It's about 50 pages. It's over there, so I won't get it, but it's this is a play by Marlowe, and Marlowe lived at the same time that Shakespeare wrote his plays. So they're contemporaries. But Marlowe writes this play about, there's this fable that's been going around forever. Goethe is a German author, and he wrote a huge book on this same story called Faust. and Marlowe writes his play called Dr. Faustus. And it's about, be sure to look up the whole storyline so you know what you're getting into, but it's about this man who sells his soul to the devil. So we've been learning about justice and mercy. Today we learned about, whether you can prove that God exists and whether you should choose him or not. And this time we're going to discuss fate or free will in this play. And I think it's going to be another really amazing discussion on some of the big, huge themes that were going on in this time period of the Renaissance. So enjoy that, and we'll see you next Wednesday. And tell Jace to get on.
Maybe he can come visit.
He's an adult. He could study with us for free.
He's probably sad he missed Pascal. I know he really likes him too, but he's discussed it with me a lot before. So I know he likes him, but that's okay. He missed him by an inch.
Yeah, that's okay. We'd love to see him.
Yeah.
And let me know when his report is, because I would love to try to come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay, good people. I sure love and appreciate you. Thanks for coming, even when your life was so busy, Shelley.
Awesome discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.